Ask 100 people what the best-selling pop song of the 1980s is, and you'll get 100 different confident answers. Michael Jackson, Madonna, Whitney Houston. Here's the twist. By the official chart math, none of them are right. And by raw sales, the actual answer isn't even a song most people would call a hit in the traditional sense at all. Today we're counting down the 10 best-selling pop songs of the 1980s. And the song at number 1 isn't the one Billboard itself crowned as the biggest hit of the decade. That song is coming in at number 6. Stick around, because the real answer is stranger and more emotional than you'd expect. Number 10. Take On Me, Aha. It's the song most people remember for one thing. A music video, where a comic book pencil sketch reaches out of the page and pulls a woman into an animated world. What most people don't know is that Take On Me actually failed. Twice. Aha released it in 1984 in a completely different arrangement, and it went nowhere in the UK or the US. It wasn't until producer Alan Tarney remixed it a year later, raising Morten Harkett's vocal into that now iconic falsetto leap, that anything changed. Even then, nobody was prepared for what happened once MTV picked up the rotoscoped video. The song sold 1.5 million copies in a single week, a number so fast that record stores reportedly couldn't restock in time. The rotoscoping technique itself, blending pencil sketch animation with live footage, was almost unheard of in music videos at the time. It won 6 awards at the very next MTV Video Music Awards. What nobody expected was how far it would travel from there. Take On Me went on to sell an estimated 7 to 9 million copies worldwide, hit number 1 in the US, and became one of the best-selling singles in chart history, from a song that had already failed twice before anyone believed in it. Up next is another song that flopped on its first release, and it took a legendary producer's piano work to bring it back from the dead. Number 9. Eye of the Tiger, Survivor. Sylvester Stallone wanted Another One Bites the Dust by Queen for Rocky III. Queen said no, so Stallone called a mid-level Chicago rock band and more or less dared them to write something better than a song from one of the biggest acts on the planet. Frankie Sullivan and Jim Peterick locked themselves in a room and built the song around a single image, a tiger's total predatory focus. The version in the movie is actually the demo. Stallone liked it so much he used it before the finished studio version even existed. That's the version that plays behind Rocky Balboa's training montage. Once it was released as a single, Eye of the Tiger shot to number 1 for 6 weeks and was certified platinum within 3 months, representing over 2 million US copies sold at the time. Since then, it's gone on to sell an estimated 8 to 9 million combined copies and digital downloads, becoming the second best-selling single of the entire year, losing the top spot to a song about aerobics that we'll get to in a minute. The next song also started life as a demo nobody took seriously. Except this one was built around 2 of the most famous names in music history, sitting at a single piano. Number 8. Ebony and Ivory, Paul McCartney and Stevie Wonder.
Harmony, side by side on my piano.
2 of the most successful songwriters in music history sat at a piano together and pointed at the black and white keys. That's the whole concept. McCartney had wanted to write about racial harmony for years, and when he finally brought the idea to Stevie Wonder, the metaphor was so simple it almost wrote itself. Recorded at AIR Studios in Montserrat with legendary Beatles producer George Martin, the song became the first duet McCartney had ever released with another major solo artist. It went to number 1 in both the UK and the US, holding the top spot for 7 consecutive weeks in America alone. It became one of the top-selling singles of 1982, and decades later, it's remembered as one of the most literal message songs ever to top the charts. It even got tangled up in real-world politics 2 years later, after Stevie Wonder publicly dedicated a 1984 Oscar win to Nelson Mandela. South Africa's state broadcaster retaliated by banning this very song outright, turning a piano metaphor about racial harmony into an actual point of political conflict. Number 7 also spent 7 weeks at number 1 that same year, but this one started life as a favor for a movie almost nobody remembers. Number 7. Endless Love, Diana Ross and Lionel Richie.
You'll be the only one.
Before Endless Love was a song, it was a favor. Lionel Richie was asked to write a theme for a 1981 film almost nobody remembers today, and he brought in Diana Ross to sing it with him. Neither of them expected what happened next. The song spent 9 consecutive weeks at #1 on the Billboard Hot 100, making it the best-selling single in the entire United States for all of 1981. It became the most successful single Motown records ever released in the label's entire history, and remains the biggest hit of Diana Ross's career to this day, out of a catalog that includes her work with the Supremes. Shortly after this song's success, Ross left Motown entirely for a then record-breaking $20 million deal with RCA, meaning this one favor for a movie ended up closing out an entire era of her career. Do you remember the first time a slow dance song like this one played at a wedding and everyone in the room went quiet at once? If songs like this one are the reason you fell in love with 80s and 90s pop, hit subscribe. We're just getting started. Here's where things get interesting. The next song was actually crowned the single biggest hit of the whole decade by the people whose entire job is tracking that. Number 6. Physical, Olivia Newton-John.
Let's get physical, physical. I wanna get physical.
Here's the twist this whole video has been building to. If you ask Billboard, the actual authority on chart performance, which song is the single biggest hit of the entire 1980s? The answer isn't Michael Jackson, and it isn't Madonna. It's Olivia Newton-John's Physical. Newton-John spent 10 weeks at #1 with this song, the longest run of any single in the entire decade, a record that stood unbroken for the next 10 years. Billboard's own official Greatest of All Time ranking crowns it the #1 song of the 1980s, full stop, ahead of every other track on this list, including 4 others you've already heard about tonight. The video, built around a fitness craze aerobics theme, was considered so provocative in 1981 that several TV stations initially refused to air it. The lyrics themselves were widely read as being about far more than exercise. That controversy didn't hurt it. If anything, it's arguably the reason the song stayed in rotation as long as it did. So if Physical is the official #1 of the decade, why isn't it topping this list? Because chart performance and raw sales tell 2 very different stories. And the further we go, the bigger that gap gets. Number 5. Billie Jean, Michael Jackson. Every countdown like this one eventually has to talk about Michael Jackson, and Billie Jean is where the numbers get almost unbelievable. 9 weeks at #1 on the R&B chart, a debut of the moonwalk during his Motown 25 television performance that reportedly caused Thriller's sales to start climbing by 1 million copies a week. And today, the RIAA certifies the single diamond, 10 million units in the US alone. Here's the honest caveat, because accuracy matters more than a big number. That diamond certification includes decades of streaming and digital downloads counted toward the total, not just 1980s-era vinyl and cassette sales. When it was upgraded in 2022, Billie Jean actually surpassed Whitney Houston's I Will Always Love You to become the oldest diamond-certified song by a solo artist in RIAA history. The song was already a phenomenon in 1983. It just kept selling for 40 more years after that. Unlike that one, the next entry didn't need 4 decades to rack up its number. It became the most played song on radio, period, in history, without ever really being a love song at all. Number 4. Every Breath You Take, The Police.
Every bond you break, every step you take, I'll be watching.
Sting has said more than once that this song is not the romantic anthem people think it is. He's described it as sinister, a song about obsession and surveillance, not devotion. Audiences didn't seem to notice or didn't seem to care. It's been played at countless weddings over the decades regardless. Every Breath You Take spent 8 weeks at #1, became the best-selling single in the US for all of 1983, and is estimated as the 5th best-selling American single of the entire decade. But the number that actually separates it from everything else on this list came in 2019, when BMY officially crowned it the most played song in radio history, over 15 million documented airplays, breaking a 22-year-old record previously held by the Righteous Brothers. Only 10 songs in BMI's entire catalog have ever crossed 10 million plays. A song about being watched has, itself, been listened to more than almost any other song ever recorded. Number 3 sold 5 million copies worldwide and topped charts in 20 different countries. But the number that matters most here isn't even about sales. Number 3, Karma Chameleon, Culture Club.
Was an addiction when we came.
Boy George wrote Karma Chameleon about something surprisingly unglamorous. The fear of people-pleasing, of changing who you are just to avoid conflict. He's called it a song about the fear of standing up, trying to suck up to everybody. It hit #1 in 20 different countries, and the music video, set in 1870s Mississippi, became just as iconic as the song itself, complete with George's trademark braids and bowler hat. Worldwide, Karma Chameleon has sold an estimated 5 million copies, making it not just Culture Club's biggest hit, but one of the best-selling singles of the entire decade globally. It also became the band's only #1 hit on the US Billboard Hot 100, despite having several other massive hits before and after it, and it won Best British Single at the Brit Awards the following year. Sitting at #2 is a song that sold twice as many copies as that one, built as a deliberate throwback to a sound that was already 20 years old by the time it came out. #2, Uptown Girl, Billy Joel. Billy Joel wrote Uptown Girl as a tribute to his then-girlfriend, model Christy Brinkley, and built the whole song around a deliberate homage to the Four Seasons doo-wop sound of the early 1960s. It's a love song dressed up as a throwback, right down to Joel's falsetto vocal delivery in the chorus. The music video, featuring Joel as a mechanic and Brinkley rolling up in a limousine, became one of MTV's most played clips of the entire year. The single sold an estimated 10 million copies worldwide, reached #1 in the UK for 5 weeks, and became one of the defining pop songs of Joel's entire career. Decades later, it was covered by the boy band Westlife, and their version also reached #1 in the UK, meaning the exact same song topped the charts twice, 2 decades apart, for 2 completely different generations of fans who may not have even known the other version existed. And at #1, we've got a song that doubled that number again, recorded not to chase a chart position, but to raise money for people who'd never even hear it on the radio. Before we get there, which of these 9 songs takes you straight back to a specific moment in your own life? Or is there one missing from this list entirely? Tell me in the comments. I read every one. #1, We Are the World, USA for Africa. This is the twist. The best-selling pop song of the 1980s isn't a chart-topping love song or a dance anthem. It's a charity single that 45 of the biggest musicians alive recorded in one night for free to fight famine in Africa. Michael Jackson and Lionel Richie wrote it in a matter of hours, finishing the song the night before its first recording session. Quincy Jones taped a sign to the studio door that read, "Check your ego at the door," before Bruce Springsteen, Bob Dylan, Stevie Wonder, Ray Charles, and dozens of other icons arrived to record it. The initial pressing of 800,000 copies sold out in just 3 days. At one record store alone, a worker reported selling 1,000 copies in 48 hours and called the pace absolutely unheard of. It became the fastest-selling American pop single in history. We Are the World has sold more than 20 million copies worldwide, making it the 8th best-selling single of all time in any genre from any decade. It was the first single ever certified multi-platinum by the RIAA. And years later, industry trackers confirmed what the sales numbers already showed. This charity single, not a chart-topping hit, is the actual best-selling pop song the entire decade produced. Physical may be Billboard's official #1 by chart performance, but We Are the World outsold it, outsold nearly every other song in this entire countdown combined, and did it while raising over $63 million for people who never bought a single copy of the record they were being helped by. So, did the list match what you expected, or were you convinced Michael Jackson would take the top spot? And if you're wondering how many one-hit wonders came out of the decade right after this one, I've got you covered. The 1990s one-hit wonder video is right here. I'll see you there.